Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, job terminators or simply misunderstood. We'll look at the role of robots in the workplace of the future. Also this week, junk status. What's next for South Africa's economy as the nation loses its investment grade rating? And a big budget casting controversy. Hollywood's accused of the whitewashing of what was meant to be an Asian character. Whether you're based in Washington or Beijing, it's something that could be keeping you awake at night. There's even a name for it: automation anxiety. And it's all about what the future of the workplace will look like if more and more companies replace humans with machines. Now, the leaders of the two world's biggest economies met face-to-face this week. Together, US President Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping oversee a workforce of 900 million people. In the past, Trump has blamed China for taking US jobs, but economists say it's the growing use of computers across all types of jobs and professions that's really disrupting the workplace and our future job prospects. Well, more than a third of US jobs could be at high risk of automation by the early 2030s. That's according to a report released last month by PricewaterhouseCoopers. Jobs in transportation and manufacturing are most at risk. Education and healthcare are least likely to be affected. There's also an automation revolution underway in China, which is now the world's biggest buyer of industrial robots. Well, let's bring in Ruben Mondejar, who's a professor at the City University of Hong Kong. He's with us now from Hong Kong. Professor, good to have you with us on Counting the Cost. Of course, job creation a major concern for domestically for both China and for the US. In the past, President Trump has accused China of stealing US jobs, but it's not really about that, is it? How big a threat is automation to the global workforce, in your opinion? Should policymakers, not just in the US and China, but all over the world, be worried?
Yes, they should be worried, but at the same time, it's a reality that actually can be very studied. I mean, it's not going to come as a surprise. Automation has been coming to us already for the past 20, 25 years. So it's just going to be an intensity. It's a degree rather than a surprise assault by automation. So, and also there are other things that they have to take into account, like the change in demographics, also the change in the combination of what are the consumer products that are attractive to certain countries and certain economies, and then the changing shifts in the nature of the economies. For example, instead of export-led, there will be consumer-led. So all these things have to be taken into account, of which automation is just one.
Technologies like artificial intelligence are revolutionizing industries such as transportation. Historically, though, technology has created more jobs than taken jobs. Why are people so worried now, do you think? I mean, bearing in mind what you've just said, is there really a reason to worry?
Well, I think, to be honest, this is more political rather than economic. As I said, the arrival of technology began since the Industrial Revolution, so this is not going to be something very new. But at the same time, voters want to hear something that could produce immediate results. And sometimes the technology, in the guise that it comes into an economy, is not the way the local workers or the local population find it to be so palatable. So that's the reason. For example, the case of President Donald Trump saying that, okay, there's a danger of China continuing to steal jobs. Well, that's because that's what he won for. You know, the voters wanted him to bring jobs back. But there are so many ways in which he can bring jobs back. One of the very important ways, for example, is for the U.S. to allow infrastructure, investment by China in infrastructure. Infrastructure has always been a sure ball solution to unemployment. It happens in China, it happens in the U.S. So if that is solved, then this is going to be a good labor and job promoter and job producer.
Professor, focusing on China just for a moment specifically, what are the tensions in the labor market there right now?
Well, if you're referring to China, the biggest tension there is the lack of of labor because of the demographics that's affecting China at the moment. Remember, the one-child policy, which was established 35 years ago, is now producing its full swing effect. And that has created labor shortages, and not just in the overall picture, but very severe in some sectors. So that is the overall picture of China at the moment. Now, given that, however, China is responding to the economic changes in the world. From export-led, they are now full swing in consumer-led economy. They're trying their best, and they're trying actually their best to import goods because they know that the Chinese market is hungry for European or US produced goods. So they're taking advantage of that because that will boost, in fact, the consumption, and which is what they need at the moment because the export-led growth has dried up already. So that is the picture of the China labor market at the moment.
Professor, a few years ago, the US Department of Labor predicted that 65% of children, school children today, will be working in jobs that don't yet exist. Do you think that there's a fear of the unknown that's causing the backlash against globalization, against technology, against immigration?
All the time when there's something unknown, the fear is always there because they go together, fear and the unknown. So when you put them together, of course it causes some kind of anxiety and even a national anxiety. But remember, the economies adjust very quickly. The jobs that we are seeing after the Silicon Valley revolution were not expected really. So, you know, all these things of the Facebook and all this type of internet jobs, which before we could not even calculate how many people would be working in those industries. But then now they came as a bonanza. But, you know, sometimes we underestimate the power of the economy to quickly adjust. And we have now so many tools to do that adjustment, unlike before, actually. So now we have so much tools. Now, there are other issues, however, that we need to look at. Like, for example, if there are industries that may require, like, for example, brain power, if a refinement in software development. So again, this will mean that if we restrict the entry of certain professionals that have been trained in that, then it will take maybe another 5 to 10 years before the US can train their people to do those jobs. That for now, I mean, we are always talking, there's a window of adjustment, which I would put, you know, even within 5 to 10 years, given especially the ability of the US and the strength of their educational system and their training institutions, that they can actually respond very quickly. The US has proven that over and over again, and I don't think any fear is warranted.
On that positive note, I think that's a positive note, Professor, we'll end it. Many thanks indeed for being with us. Now, a new movie has attracted criticism for casting a white Hollywood star as an Asian heroine. As Rod McBride reports now, the controversy is all about box office receipts and the pulling power of Western versus Asian actors.
Largely filmed in Hong Kong, this was the city's first chance to see it. A sci-fi action picture looking distinctly Asian, except for a distinctly white Scarlett Johansson in the lead. For many moviegoers, it didn't seem to matter.
I loved the comic strip, so it's disappointing not to have a Japanese actor, but it's still great.
I think it's fine to have a Westerner play the lead, and I love Scarlett Johansson.
On Chu Chen is a local producer who worked on the film. International audiences, he says, expect their action heroes to be Western, a reality the movie companies have to play to, given the money involved.
Nowadays, movies budget is talking about 100 to maybe 200 million US dollars. I mean, it's an investment at the bottom of the line. So basically, when people look at the investment, people have to be very careful.
Let me fight with you.
It follows other recent movies with Asian storylines, but controversially white lead actors.
They feel connected to something
Not surprisingly, some of the loudest criticism has come from Asian actors in the US, already finding it tough enough to get good parts without competing with their white colleagues. But Hong Kong is no stranger to the practice. Probably the city's best-known actor, Bruce Lee, was famously passed over for a white actor in the 1970s TV show Kung Fu. For movie academics, there is a long history of racial stereotyping by the entertainment industry.
Stars are made, stars are promoted, stars are marketed. So if they invest as much as they have on these white A-list stars, they can easily create an equally compelling list of non-white A-list stars. And this is something that Hollywood is not doing.
Growing movie demand, especially from China, may change that. For now, it seems having an Asian lead in a Western blockbuster is like wishing on a star.
Rob McBride, still to come on Counting the Cost. Secrets in paradise. Has it become more difficult to legally hide wealth in tax havens? We'll look at what's happened since the Panama Papers were leaked exactly 1 year ago. But first, this week, South Africa's credit rating was downgraded to junk status by global ratings agency S&P. It acted after President Jacob Zuma fired a widely respected finance minister. Junk status sounds like it's completely worthless, but it's not. What it really means is that the company, or in this case, country in question, is in the kind of economic shape which will make it harder for it to repay its debts. It doesn't mean that they won't be able to, but there's a risk they might not. The flip side is that with junk status comes higher interest rates, which can mean higher yields for an investor if that country turns the corner. The Congress of South African Trade Unions says it no longer has confidence in Jacob Zuma after he sacked his finance minister. Al Jazeera's Tanya Page reports from Pretoria.
The COSATU Federation of Trade Unions has always vigorously defended President Jacob Zuma until now. The president's sacking of Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan has had serious consequences for the economy and prompted COSATU to also call for Zuma to go. The protest group Save SA has set up camp outside the Treasury and welcomed the additional pressure on Zuma.
We are happy that COSATU, a trade union which has got history in South Africa, is saying that Zuma must go. They have come to their senses. We are appreciative of that.
The unprecedented move by COSATU is important because it's in an alliance with the governing African National Congress and the South African Communist Party, which has already called for Zuma to go. But ultimately, the president's fate rests with the ANC. The leaders of the ANC are divided. The scrutiny of credit ratings agencies is adding to the pressure on them. Standard & Poor's has downgraded South Africa's credit rating to junk status, blaming political uncertainty and the abrupt sacking of the finance minister. His replacement could be facing a crisis less than a week into the job.
We do need to address the perceptions about the political stability, the risks and uncertainties they are talking about, the policy uncertainties that they have, to reassure them of our intention to stay the course.
Junk status means the likelihood of there being a job for these unemployed security guards when they reach the front of this queue is more unlikely. Higher borrowing costs means the government will also have less money for investment projects aimed at stimulating the sluggish economy. The rand currency is also losing more value. In these troubled economic and political times, South Africans are watching how their leaders respond, ready for more turmoil.
Well, joining us now from London is John Ashbourne. John is the Africa economist with a London-based Capital Economics. John, good to have you with us. What do you make of President Zuma sacking his finance minister?
Well, it's certainly another unfortunate surprise for the South African economy. There's been political risk rising in that country for some time due to tensions between President Zuma and Pravin Gordhan, who was until last week the finance minister, and things seem to have come to a head, which resulted in Mr. Gordhan being sacked. He was quite a respected minister in the business community and more broadly, so it's thrown a lot of people into a bit of surprise. Now,
the new finance minister says he's going to radically transform South Africa's economy. Can he do that?
It isn't really clear, and it isn't exactly clear even what he means by that, because Malusi Gigaba, who is the new finance minister, in his first press conference both said that he would radically transform the economy and also that he would maintain policy continuity with what came before, which is obviously impossible. So at the present time, it's very difficult to know what changes, if any, will be made to government policy in South Africa.
Standard & Poor's downgraded South Africa's credit rating effectively to junk status. What does that mean, and how does South Africa go about repairing its credit rating, getting out of this trough?
Well, it certainly is a huge sign that the markets are losing confidence in South African governance. A lot of this was tied to the reshuffle by Mr. Zuma. But it's worth noting, for one thing, that yields on South African dollar debt were already quite high. People had been expecting this for some time. It didn't come as a huge surprise. And also that most South African debt is denominated in local currency. So the majority of South African debt wasn't affected by this downgrade, just their foreign, their international debt. Even so, it's difficult to spin this in a positive way. It certainly shows that there are concerns about South Africa's trajectory. And when other countries have gone through this, they've been downgraded, it's taken years and years to get back to investment grade, if they ever have. So it will be a long trek, and it's not clear where that's going.
And what about the rand, which of course dropped rather dramatically against the dollar after the sacking of the finance minister? Can the rand weather this storm?
Well, it maybe can, in fact, because the rand has fallen by about 10% since this whole storm with the cabinet began. But it's about where it was at the beginning of this year. It's been appreciating for some time, and so this pared back recent gains, but it hasn't sent it to significant new lows. So there have been some forces to do with commodity prices that have added to support to the rand. This is eroding those. But the rand's actually in a reasonably good position to weather this storm compared to where it would have been, for example, last year. Even so, a weaker rand is still worrying for South African consumers, particularly for people who buy imported goods. So it is a bit of a concern, but probably not in the way that it would have been a year or so ago.
So what is the outlook for South Africa? I mean, is South Africa a steady bet for the future? I mean, in terms of jobs, in terms of the economy, GDP?
Well, in terms of jobs in the economy, South Africa has massive problems. And one of the reasons why the new finance minister, using a term like radical economic transformation, is indeed attractive to some people is that you have such high unemployment in that country, such high inequality, that many people do think that something radical needs to be tried to jump things out of the way they are. But the economy as a whole is probably a bit more stable than people are giving it credit for. We had a significant drought last year, which is now passing. Growth will probably hold up better than many people are expecting, probably closer to 2% than to 1%. But the problem is that that's still very, very low. If you still have population growth of about 1%, then growing at 1.5, growing at 2% a year in terms of economic growth really doesn't create very many more jobs. It doesn't create a significant change in the structure of the economy. So I think that things will remain very, very difficult in South Africa, even if they weather this storm. And if they don't, if growth slows down significantly, then you'll have significant social tensions in a society where even at the best of times, you have unemployment running at about 25%.
John, great to talk to you on Counting the Cost. Many thanks indeed.
Thank you very much.
Now, it was the biggest leak in the history of data journalism. 1 year ago, the release of the Panama Papers exposed a hidden world. They revealed the secret way in which profits from corruption, tax evasion and money laundering can legally be hidden. For the first time, we could see exactly the methods used by the rich and powerful to conceal their wealth from authorities and the taxman, and just how widespread the practice is. The scandal brought down the Icelandic Prime Minister and forced other prominent people to explain why their names appeared in the documents. Well, joining us now from the Cayman Islands is Alex Cobham. Alex is the Chief Executive of the UK-based Tax Justice Network. Alex, welcome to Counting the Cost. A year on, what in your opinion was the significance of the Panama Papers?
Look, the really important feature wasn't so much that we got details of individual cases of corruption or tax evasion. It's that it laid bare to the wider public around the world the systemic nature of these problems. The fact that it's not just one or two anonymous companies, it's an entire mechanism, you know, using banks in the UK and Switzerland, not just a law firm in Panama, that's selling secrecy around the world. And that secrecy corrupts, and that very often, you know, people aren't hiding things for no reason. What they're hiding is one or other form of corruption, of tax abuse. So I think putting that in front of people in the stark way that the Panama Papers leaks have done has really galvanized public opinion. I don't think there's any going back from this point. The question is how quickly we get to the kind of solutions that are really needed.
So in the last year, has it become easier or harder for people to hide their wealth in tax havens?
That's a good question. I think in practical terms, it hasn't changed very much. But what has happened is that it will have become much more worrying if your business is hiding money or hiding your ownership for corrupt purposes. You'll be much more worried now than you would have been before this leak broke. The reason for that is that although things haven't yet changed, what we've got is almost all of the financial centers in the world, with the exception of the United States of America, now signed up in theory from either this year or 2018 to provide information automatically to each other on who owns financial instruments, bank accounts, and so on. Now, if that process works, as we very much hope it will, then at that point this process becomes much harder.
But, Alex, here you and I are speaking via Skype today. You're in the Cayman Islands, I'm in Doha in the Middle East. Does technology make it easier for people to hide their money from the authorities, even the banks who are, so say, now taking part in this reporting process?
So technology can work in both ways, okay? If you think about it, a lot of this process got started in a place like the Cayman Islands back in the 50s and 60s, when actually technology wasn't really on the side of hiding stuff. Technology now makes it much, much easier for tax authorities and financial intelligence units that are trying to crack down on money laundering to align information they're getting from different places to see, for example, whether individual taxpayers are declaring the same things that the tax authority is hearing from other countries, from other jurisdictions. So I think we've reached a tipping point, and actually technology is now on the side of those who would prefer to have transparency, because it allows us really to see, if we can put this information together, the global picture of what a person or a company is declaring as their entire property.
Alex, really good to talk to you on Counting the Cost. Many thanks indeed for being with us.
Thanks a lot.
And finally, farmers in Indonesia's Karst Mountains are angry about plans to build a large cement factory there. And as Step Varsen reports from Kendeng, they're using an unusual form of protest to make their point.
Extreme measures to show how they say a cement factory will paralyze their lives. Unable to move for days, these farmers got the attention of President Joko Widodo. The rallies are led by women who are called the Kartinis of Kendeng, after Indonesia's most famous female fighter for women's rights, Raden Ajeng Kartini. They fear cement factories built in the Karst Mountains will ruin their land and pollute their water supply and irrigation system.
I will fight to my last drop of blood, because our ancestors fought for this land for hundreds of years, and that's why we can enjoy the water and the fruits from this land. We won't allow it to disappear like that.
Kendeng Mountain is a 35-kilometer area of Karst Mountains, containing not only springs and underground rivers, but also chalk used in the production of cement. Some smaller companies have been mining here for years, but now larger companies are coming in. The factory was due to start production last November, until the Supreme Court revoked its permit, saying the company's environmental program was unclear. The provincial governor reissued the permit after the company nearly halved the area it planned to mine. Environmental groups say the permit goes against the Supreme Court decision. Then President Joko Widodo intervened in the dispute and ordered a new environmental assessment.
The women farmers so far managed to halt production of 3 million tons of cement every year, but the legal battle is ongoing. While the women fight to protect their land, the cement companies insist that the factories will help develop this impoverished region.
The cement factory says it is using the latest technology to make sure mining and production activities will spare the environment as much as possible.
At the national level, the mine and factory will help maintain Indonesia's development, and the demand for cement can be fulfilled.
The company has promised the factory will provide work for nearly 2,000 people, but the farmers say their land can provide an income to many more.
What we want to show is that Indonesia is being shackled by cement and by the industry. Indonesia is an agrarian nation. What needs to be done is to develop farmland.
Freed from their cemented feet, the women farmers say they will continue their protests, hoping that their children and grandchildren will be able to enjoy this land as much as they did.
Step Vassen ending our show for this week. Don't forget there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our webpage, which has individual reports, links, even entire episodes for you to catch up with. You can also get in touch with us via Twitter. I'm at @Finnegan. Please use the hashtag AJCTC when you do. Or drop us a line, countingthecost@aljazeera.net, our email address. But that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan from the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.